You're welcome back to Afia TV News tonight, and our conversation segment is centered around ENUGU kicking off the smart school, the smart basic education. And the secretary to the ENUGU state government, Professor Chidebere Onya, had said that 50% of pupils in the state can neither read in English nor solve simple mathematics questions. And Onya stated this while delivering a keynote address titled Smart Basic Education and the Future of Africa at the quadrennial convention of the Old Boys Association of Union Secondary School, or Konano, in ENUGU. But according to him, the government discovered the shortcoming in its baseline assessment of primary schools in the state conducted in November 2023. And he said, and I quote, "Our findings were shocking. After 6 years of primary school, 50% of our children cannot read a single word in English, and those who can read struggle with comprehension. 50% of our children cannot solve simple subtraction challenges. What we found out in ENUGU State is writ large across our nation," unquote. He expressed displeasure that in Nigeria, 3 out of 4 children who completed basic education lack numeracy and literacy proficiency. The World Bank, UNICEF, and UNESCO have defined this as the Nigerian learning crisis. And on top of this, he says, and I quote, "Our children suffer a skills gap because existing modes of teaching do not equip children with scientific, technological, productive, and digital competencies." The SSG, however, said that the state government education policy has been repositioned to incorporate bio-digital technology that will drive industrial growth. This, he said, will be achieved through the introduction of innovative technologies in education, particularly at the basic education level. He says that Governor Peter Mba had taken deliberate steps at reforming the education system to meet the changing global demands. Onya assured that the challenges were being addressed through well-thought-out radical policy initiatives by the government, and he also said this includes the introduction of smart school model across the 260 electoral wards in the state, which had new facilities such as centers for artificial intelligence and robotics and interactive smart boards, among others. Well, joining me to dissect this and many more is Professor Ndubweze Mba, Honorable Commissioner for Education in ENUGU State. Good evening, sir, and welcome to the show.
Good evening.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so you have great interest in gender identities and hierarchy in Nigeria, as your recent article implies. Right, so do tell us a bit about that, especially as regards to education.
Thank you. Yes, I'm a historian of Africa and of development. I'm also an Atlantic World Scholar, and I have mid-career taken great interest in K-12 education.
Okay.
That is the education sector concentrating on children between 3 and 5 years old. There's a pre-kindergarten to all the way to secondary school. So there is, because of the way you framed this question, there's actually a very interesting and quite disconcerting disconnect between the status of the girl child and the woman in many of the ethnic nationalities that make up contemporary Nigerian society before the 19th century, and the status of the Nigerian girl child and woman today. Right? So we've shifted radically from a society of gender equality and equal opportunities to one of gender disparities. This relates to the learning crisis. I think it's a wonderful introduction. It lays out everything. It relates to the learning crisis because the learning crisis also reflects a significant gender disparity in its impact, and that is the one dimension that is not captured in the introduction.
Okay.
When we look at the non-completion of basic education in Nigeria, for example, the average is that 48% of children in Nigeria do not complete basic education. For girl children, it's actually 55%. And the notion had been that this was a reality peculiar to the northern Nigerian states because of the cultural impact of Islam. And we were indeed shocked when we discovered a significant impact comparable to what we're finding in some other states in ENUGU.
Really?
From the November 2023 baseline assessment conducted not by any state agency, but by an independent, globally renowned institution, the New Globe, right? So I think, credit should be given where it's due. They conducted this assessment, and it was independently done, and they presented the data. And indeed, we were shocked, right? And an indication of these, the gendered disparities in this learning crisis is that shortly after this, ENUGU State was onboarded onto the World Bank program known as the Agile program, right, which is focused on empowering girl children and giving them equal opportunity in education. And historically, the World Bank had denied southeastern states access to this program, right? So we operate in this, in an environment without data. We plan without information, and the government of Governor Peter Ndubisimba is dedicated to changing that. That if you are going to invest, you should work with data.
So let me take you back a little. You said the World Bank had denied the Southeast states access to the funds. Have they now?
Yes, right now ENUGU is onboarded, Abia State is onboarded, for example, right? Because we're finding that there is indeed gender disparities in the learning crisis. It's impacting everybody, but it's impacting girl children the more.
But I think sometimes that while we talk about the girl child, and proudly I'm a girl child, I think we shouldn't leave out the boy child.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, maybe some statistics should also go that way, because you see a lot of boys on the streets.
No, we agree.
No,
I mean, the 48%
education.
is across the board. I mean, the fact that we were talking about, 48 out of every 100, boys and girls, right? But when we drill down, we find a slight greater impact on girls. So we're not leaving boys out of the equation.
Great. So, go ahead.
But the more important thing here is that the smart green school intervention at the basic education level of His Excellency, Governor Barrister Peter Ndubisimba, is a holistic approach. It is not one that is targeted at a subsection of the demography or of the subnational.
Great.
Part of the subnational is not focused on rural versus urban or urban versus rural. The idea here is to ensure that every child, irrespective of where they are, irrespective of their gender, has equal access to world-class basic education, which is a fundamental child right.
Okay, so before I go into my questions, when I read your article, I was very enthused with the words that you used, and you were talking about, still the same article, you spoke about husband-wife owners. Could you shed some light on that?
So this is delving into deep pre-colonial African history research, which does not have a lot of bearing on the current education reform directly. But so the articles that some of the articles I've published in world-renowned peer-reviewed journals and my monograph have focused on exploring aspects of female political authority, agency, innovation, and economic independence in African societies, especially in the historic region of southeastern Nigeria, before the colonial period, so before the 19th century. And my interest in doing this has been to show that colonialism had set us on a path of underdevelopment, but one that has impacted one gender demography more than the other negatively, and that is women. Right? And so the larger story here is that when I put on my Commissioner for Education thinking cap on, the connection I make between my scholarship and my civil service work, my public service work, is to, I've been in a position where I have been providing an intellectual criticism of colonial underdevelopment. And now I have an opportunity in a post-colonial moment to change that colonial legacy. So what am I going to do about it? As a Nigerian man, as a black man, as a father, as a husband, as a son of ENUGU. What I can do about that is to empower every child
Great.
in this state.
All right, so let's look at, away from your publications, which were very interesting, by the way, I read some of them. Let's look at Innovation Africa 2023 conference in Kigali, Rwanda. You were very particular about exploring Peter Mba's sustainable solution plans for ENUGU's education transformation. How much were you able to explore the sustainable solutions there?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That was a really engaging and eye-opening conference.
Okay.
There were delegates from every single African nation, federal, government delegates, and there were development partners from all over the world, and especially education sector technology investors at Kigali. And Rwanda was hosting this conference because it had become it's become a good example, a celebrated example of what a small African nation, what we may even call a subnational. I mean, the country is as small as some states, some African subnational states, not countries. So, but it's amazing what they've been able to do with limited resources by prioritizing investment in education in a sustainable way, aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And they understood that the education system is a pyramid, that if you get the foundation right, the basic education, the first 9 years of a child's life, right, or 9 to 11 years, if you count pre-primary 1 and 2, that if you have a strong foundation, that the child can only build on top of that, right? So because the middle sector is the senior secondary, SS1 to 3, and they have the tertiary institutions. So it's really a pyramid, and the numbers reflect that, right, the demography. And so Rwanda has gotten a lot of things, right, and they've done so with, maximal investment in minimal technology, maximal investment in teacher training and professionalization, maximal investment in curriculum reform and pedagogy improvement, right? And so it was a really eye-opening moment, and it was very interesting to get testimonies from other African nations about what they were doing, right? From Tanzania, from Ghana, from South Africa. And what became clear was that somehow, even before any human being was appointed a commissioner in this administration, the governor had figured out a blueprint to get us, not just where Rwanda is, but to get us past anything that any African nation has achieved in the basic education sector. He figured this out, and he's only brought us on board to help drive that vision home. So, I mean, all of this credit goes to Governor Peter Mba, because he was in Rwanda. He attended that conference years before I did. And so this was, for me, a reaffirming engagement, reaffirming in the sense, reaffirming the vision of the governor and my commitment to seeing it happen and seeing the potential. And
we expect that you will do something in your sector to ensure that what you saw in Kigali is brought home.
I mean, what we're doing is way beyond what has been done in any African nation.
Okay.
We are pioneering experiential learning in Africa, in ENUGU State.
Okay.
Great. I mean, experiential learning is a pedagogy revolution that is only emerging in certain places. In New York, not even across the United States, but in New York specifically, in Argentina, in Costa Rica, to an extent, right? It's been limited to institutions of higher education, and only of late, right, is percolating to K-12. And so ENUGU State, in embracing this as a sustainable solution, not just as a fad, but something that is retooled to solve endemic problems. And our endemic problems are really clear now, right? Because of the non-disarticulation of primary schools and secondary schools. When kids finish primary 6, most girl children are pulled out. They don't go to secondary schools and complete JS 1 to 3, and our basic education goes up to JS 3. In the new smart schools we are building, they go up to JS 3, they're integrated. You get a child in there in pre-primary 1, they stay there for 11 years and they finish basic education. You know that that child is well educated, is equipped to succeed in life. They can go to vocational schools, become entrepreneurs, or they could go to senior secondary schools and prepare for entry into professional universities and colleges, right? In that school, we are solving the skills gap. the skills gap is basically a situation where we have a paper certificate syndrome,
okay.
where we send our kids through K-12 and university, and they lack any realistic skill. There is no experiential and practical components to their education. It's all theoretical, it's hypothetical, it's rote memorization, right? So when you put a computer in front of that child, even university graduates, they don't know what to do with it, right? Meanwhile, I have a 12-year-old nephew who is learning coding and who is, developing apps, right? Because they're taking a class online. So experiential learning is giving children the real-life skills, digital, practical, problem-solving, critical thinking, to learn how to take charge of their own, to learn how to take charge of their own learning pathway, right? So, and to attain knowledge in ways that are retentive. Because when a teacher writes on the board, ask a child to copy it down, and then memorize it and remember it in an exam, it's just for the purpose of the exam. But when you have a child practice, work on a project, where they mobilize their knowledge to solve a problem, right? Whether it's a problem in the classroom, or a problem outside the classroom, and they can make that linkage between the theory and the practice, they learn in a way that is deeply retentive.
Okay.
And they acquire skills along the way. All
right. So sometime in October 2023, you examined teachers for the Transformation ENUGU Smart and Green Basic Schools. How was your assessment of the teachers? Would you say you were impressed with the number? And what was the success rate?
Yeah, this is a really... that was a sobering experience, but it was also an encouraging experience. And I say this way. So we had about 17,000 candidates apply. We put them through a basic assessment. So these are exam questions set for no more than the capacity of children who are in SS1.
Okay.
Right? And 30% passed. Whoa. 30% passed the exam, right? And then when we put them through a digital literacy assessment, that number went down to about 300.
Just 300 teachers?
300 teachers.
Okay.
From 17,000. So that in itself tells a big story. For a state that teachers have been cited as examples, and we have great schools here, we have great teachers, we have well-performing
Montessori schools.
Yes, we have a lot, right? And yet we experience, but what we have done is to say we are not going to throw out our teachers. We're not going to do what they did in a state in the north, which is sack all the teachers and hire new ones as if miraculously they come up pre-baked. We're saying we did this assessment because we wanted to identify the best teachers in Enugu State, about 100 to 200 of them, train them intensively as our pilot teachers, and then use that pilot training program to roll out a comprehensive teacher training and professional development program that will train every single teacher in Enugu State.
So was this training was the examination for just the public schools, or you cut across the private schools?
We cut across both the public and private schools.
And in that, you had just 300 people pass?
Yes. Like excel.
Okay.
With a pass mark of above 80 and 85%. Excel.
Okay. There's so much
Not just
work
in
for you to
content
do.
area. Yeah, there's a lot of work, but one of the Federal Ministry of Education and the World Bank, the other information they released is that 65 to 78% of teachers in Nigeria have not attended any professional development training over the past 5 years. This was data as of 2022.
That tells a lot of our education system, right?
So any serious education reform program must account for a three-legged stool that involves, one, a sustainable, engaged, and school-based program of teacher training, professional development, and mentoring. That is one. And I'm saying I put all those adjectives there because the alternative has not worked, which is you organize something once in a while for 3 months and you say you've trained teachers and you disappear. That is what the CSOs and NGOs have been doing, and it's not working. You need to have an ongoing program of teacher development, capacity building that is ongoing, year after year. I need to tie that to promotion, incentives, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so let's look at one of your core assignments, which is to oversee the establishment of smart schools across the 260 wards. How is that coming through, especially with the kickoff you had on Monday? Am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
So our pilot school at Owo is completed, and we've launched it. We have an incoming class of 960 children from pre-primary 1 and 2 to JSS 3. We've assembled them from 4 pre-existing primary schools in the ward and 2 pre-existing secondary schools. And these are, the classes are filled up. Our smart teachers are deployed. They're ecstatic, they're excited, they're enthusiastic. They're developing experiential learning based scheme of work, and they're already engaging students in how to make use of experiential learning workbook to engage teachers and engage the curriculum. It's a very different dynamic. And so the pilots, both the training of the teachers, the deployment of teachers, the use of an artificial intelligence-backed curriculum generation system that complements the work of teachers. All of these things are integrated in our smart green schools.
Okay, so let me ask how accessible...
And we're going to now roll it out in the 260 wards across the state.
How accessible and affordable will this scheme be for all the residents of ENUGU? We're hoping it's not for the scheme is not for the rich alone. Also, I have a very important question. One of our contributors and viewer who had seen the flyer before the program had asked that we ask you of your plans for teachers in ENUGU and how the National School Feeding Program would work here in ENUGU. But I think on a lighter note, I would like to ask, before you answer your plans for teachers,
I hope I remember all of them.
Are you a teacher yourself? Are you a
yes,
or were you a teacher before
I am a teacher.
Okay.
I am a teacher.
All right. So what are your plans for teachers in ENUGU State?
Okay, so the governor's plan for teachers in ENUGU State is a complete systemic transformation. It's not just about salary. It's not just about incentive and allowances. It's about building modern residences for teachers at the site of the school.
Okay, great.
Right? It's about providing eco-restorative, green means of transportation for teachers and students. Right? It's about creating a community around the school of which teachers are the major stakeholders. It's about providing ongoing professional development opportunities, both here in Nigeria and abroad, for ENUGU Smart Basic School teachers. Right? It's about providing scholarships and training opportunities and professionalization opportunities for teachers. It's about linking them to resources. It's about restoring the dignity of nation builders, which is what teachers are. Both my parents were teachers. My mother was a retired head teacher. My father was a retired school principal. We come from a family of teachers. I myself am a teacher at the university level, right?
Okay.
So
the National School Feeding Program?
The National School Feeding Program is a laudable but poorly resourced program. The president is committed to restoring it and dignifying it, simply to ensure that children who go to school have a decent, nutritious meal at lunchtime a day. This is a global best practice. It's not even a third world or development world problem. If you remember, Michelle Obama dedicated the entire time of being first lady to ensuring that the nutrition lunch program across the United States was a nutrition-rich program, right? And this is simply because if you want to keep children in school longer and ensure that they learn and they take advantage of the resources you have invested in those schools, you need to make sure that they're fed and that the school is a safe and happy environment. It's an extension of home, but just with more resources for character formation, for knowledge acquisition, and for the formation of civic-minded citizens. And the school feeding program is critical to that. It is the number 3 United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, Zero Hunger Initiative.
Okay.
It is a fundamental child rights act, and the governor is committed to this. That is why in each smart school, we have a greenhouse farm that provides food, fresh vegetables year-round to supplement both the federal and state school feeding programs, and to provide children with a smart, integrated, future-oriented, biotechnological solution to sustainable food systems.
Mr. Commissioner,
Yes.
Afia TV would surely be looking around for these smart schools, because you said a lot. You said a lot about the smart schools, and we will be looking for. My time is up, but I quickly would ask that you were among the 7-member committee set up to probe the alleged 84 billion naira fraud in ENUGU State College of Technical. Tell us how that investigation is going in 1 minute, please.
Yes, so the investigation has gone very well.
Okay.
Our committee have concluded their work. We've submitted it to the state government, and the programmatic action implementation recommendations have been activated, beginning with a global best practice system of recruitment of school management, which is you advertise it and you open it up to the best candidates in the world, whether they're in this country or not, and let them apply, and they set up a peer review committee to go through that, evaluate it, and make recommendations based on merit. That had never been done before. We're doing now. The governor has mandated that this is the pathway that ENUGU must take, because he's dedicated 3% of the state budget to education, and we cannot entrust it to people who are not qualified.
Okay. That conversation on the fraud and the investigation is something we'd like to keep up with, and maybe on our next show we'll talk in depth on that, because my time is up right now. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us, Professor Ndubweze Mba, Honorable Commissioner for Education, Enugu State. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.